Hello, welcome again to the Housing Sector Podcast. Today I'm joined by Simon Reay, who I think is a bit of a disruptor. He sounds like a good guy in the sector to me. Simon, would you like to give a little background, a little introduction about who you are?
Morning, Ben. Certainly, I'm Simon. We have a company in the sector that supplies software to housing associations across the UK, and we would be a piece of software that your landlord might use to log a repair or send you a letter or run their finances. So we'd be the software powering their delivery of service.
Now, as anyone who keeps track of me online, they'll know that, and we're recording this on Friday, the 4th of July, that last weekend we had no emergency lighting. And again, it comes down to this breakdown in communication between my landlord and the residents, something that they've acknowledged as part of their new customer strategy, that the communication's what's lacking here. How would you be able to support, for example, my landlord in better communication, in recording faults, in linking all those chains and dots together so that my report is investigated, is fixed, and I'm kept in the loop?
I think a lot of the problem here is availability of information. So with software in the sector, it needs to support the business in those aspirations, because sometimes businesses have got systems that just don't sort of lend themselves to those aspirations, and they can't buy other software because their core software isn't able to integrate that stuff in. So, we, as a landlord, any landlord in the UK should be looking to communicate clearly to their customers over a preferred method of contact. So if you prefer a text, but your neighbour prefers an email, then that should be taken into account because that's what they prefer. They don't like getting text or whatever. There should be public information on your customer portal with a nice feed saying, well, actually, these works are going on in your area. If they know your door entry system is broke, they should text everybody in the block and say, look, we've had that repair in. It's going to stop 20 phone calls from 20 people coming in saying the door entry's broke. They get less calls. You know proactively, oh, they've spotted that already. They're fixing that. It's about that sort of regular update. And that text might cost them 4p or 6p, but that phone call in when your neighbour rings and their neighbour rings and that neighbour rings is going to cost them £1.30 in terms of transactional fees. So it's reducing that cost, saving a bit of money, improving customer care. Everybody's after doing that, but I think some organizations just don't have the tools to do it. And if the tools they've got don't allow great integration and don't do it themselves, there's no option for them. They can't sit and write, Dear Ben on their phone and then, Dear Mary, that's part of the problem. Technology needs to be an enabler, and that gets talked about a lot. But the practicalities of that come down to some of the stuff that you were talking about recently about we haven't had any communication. I've rang and nothing. I rang and nobody knows who sent the message. Nobody knows who rang me. That information when you ring up should be available. So the customer service team know that the text was sent, know who sent the text, know what it was about, can track the repair and say, yes, I can see there's an appointment for scaffolding or emergency lighting people. It's about having things to hand so that organizations can deliver on those visions. And that's our job as tech suppliers,
Well, now I'm going to play devil's advocate for my own landlord, something that I never thought I would do. But there's been multiple mergers, and this isn't just to my own landlord. Multiple mergers as housing associations become bigger and bigger. But they have these legacy systems, so they have all of their data in different silos, different pots. They can't quite get it to sing together as one harmony, as one choir in harmony. How does your software help them with that?
I think part of the problem is the age of that software. So if you look at some of the softwares, and there are very few because there's actually been mergers in my sector, in the supply sector. So there used to be 7, then there were 6, now there's 4. So right now if you're a big landlord, you've got a choice of 4 legacy brands, my brand, and that's it. That's all you can choose. That's all you've got. So of those legacy products, the ones of any sort of scale are on 15, 20, 25-year-old tech. In terms of that's when they started to be written. Doesn't make them bad software necessarily. It doesn't have to be bad software on that tech, but it's got a lot of what we call technical debt in there, things that just have sat there for forever and just been, and we were the first software company to write from scratch. So we develop, it's easier for us to develop way more quickly. It's better it's easier for us to engage with our customers on our customers and our landlords at a digital level. So our landlords feed into our online forum to say this is what we'd like to see in the product, and we can take account of all of those views and votes and go, right, these are the popular things for this release that we do every couple of months. So while we release every 2 months, most of my competitors would release every 2 years. So I can respond to OWASB law and hazard reporting and damp and mold issues and bring features into the platform that's going to help that. So every 8 weeks, we're bringing something new in. And I think that's part of the problem. If your software is only evolving every 2 years, how do you respond to all of the new legislation, all of the changes and the changing demands of your customers? 25 years ago, when I was first coming into the sector, we couldn't text people, and systems were just all siloed, and just you just dealt with it back then. But expectations have changed, and the pace of change is so fast now that we have to change as providers to keep up with an evolving sector and the evolving demands of our customers and their customers.
You see, I have a fear that we're all running off of old Excel spreadsheets, all CSV files that are corrupted or old, the data's old. Can you, when it's great having a new system, and I like what I'm hearing, but if my data's not pure and I'm feeding that into your system, what's the concern there?
One of the biggest jobs that we have when we sell to a housing association is they've had terrible systems for such a long time that they've got all of these workarounds. And you're absolutely right, Ben. I've gone to landlords at 13,000 units, 18,000 units, and they're tracking gas servicing compliance on a spreadsheet with color coding. And
Yeah.
that relies on a lot of manual work. And inevitably, there's something on that spreadsheet. There's properties missing that were onboarded and not put on. There's something not stitched up, and we find something there. An organization of that size and scale for that money should not be doing that, but they have no choice because there's no alternative in their sort of current toolkit. So you're absolutely right. That's part of the problem. And one of the biggest challenges we have when we're onboarding data is that data is terrible. I could go onto a landlord system and find 6 copies of the same person because actually they made a complaint and somebody didn't realize they were already there, so they got created again, and then actually they moved house, so they were created again because somebody did the wrong button. And there's been no control of that. So you'll find 6 copies of Ben Jenkins and go, which one's the right one? Because it's actually all the same person. So I think that's a big challenge for us. And when we onboard data, it's a massive part of our projects because our system will enforce a lot of rules and say that's not a real mobile number. Mobile numbers don't have brackets mum at the end of them. That's the same person as that. Pick one and we'll merge them together. We've got to go through that process and then have processes in the platform to make sure that it's still the same. Otherwise, they might be doing a great job communicating to Ben Jenkins, but it's actually one of the other 6 Ben Jenkins on the system, and it's not yours with your current up-to-date contact details, etc. And then when it comes to things like online access, we say, oh, actually, we're going to give all our customers online access. They can see their repairs, they can get updates on their complaints, they can check their statement, they can make a payment, they can apply for a transfer, all these wonderful things. If I've got 6 copies of Ben Jenkins on, which one, what on earth are you going to log in as? What are you going to get when you log in? So it's really important if you want to deliver that, you've got to potentially start again and say, how do it, clean it all up, do the best we can, and start to enrich that data. And I'm seeing a lot of organizations going through data enrichment programs where they're visiting their customers and doing what they call a tenancy audit or a tenancy health check or something like that. Say, well, okay, how are you doing? How's your property? How's your, oh, actually, we're missing information on the type of heating that you've got or the type of, smoke alarm or when it was last replaced or whatever. And they're doing asset related checks and customer related checks as well to try and enrich that because we're giving that platform to enable them to do that out in the field on their tablet while they're at your door. Instead of having a bit of paper on a flip chart and having to go back to the office to fill it in and spend more money doing all of that. It's about putting the right data in the right hands at the right time, so it's easy to update. Because actually some of these staff are super busy and they're running around crazy and they don't have the time to do it all and do a full end-to-end job. Making it the path of least resistance will mean that it's going to be the thing that they do naturally because it's the way that they can get more visits done or more customers looked after or more repairs complete or whatever that is. So yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of, and this is part of the problem. You see sort of conference sessions on big data. We're going to have a conference on big data. Everyone talk about big data and it's all great. And then they'll go back to their spreadsheets. So they'll sit in those conferences and nod and go, yeah, that's a big issue. Yeah, those are definitely great ideas. And then they'll go back and color code the spreadsheet a bit more. Or that, it's it's implementing that and sort of making that change. But housing is a slow to change, risk averse organization. As a general as a general sector, it takes a while to bring that on. And that's what we're trying to push for. And we've got some amazing landlords working super hard, large and small. It's really interesting to see the very different approaches that different landlords take. And you're right, with more and more mergers, you see a lot of big landlords, but you also see some small landlords that don't have those resources, that are just trying their very best to do a great job. Pros and cons, definitely pros and cons. There's no sweet spot where I'd go, oh, if I had a magic wand, every housing association would be 3,000 properties, because it's perfect. It's
Yeah.
not. Big ones have issues, small ones have issues.
My landlord might have my name, six different accounts, but I guarantee it flags up.
Everyone's got it red. Everyone will have a red flag. Every single one of those got a red flag, definitely.
You
100.
mentioned conferences there. This is initially why you reached out to me. I've been a little bit vocal on the money that's being sort of hemorrhaged through all these conference events, and you need to sort of pay to play, and buy your table at the event show so you can gateway sort of to the providers and through their procurement hoops. What are your thoughts, without putting your head on a chopping board? I don't expect you to do that, Simon, but what are your thoughts on the money that's wasted or spent, however you look at it, on these big corporate events, and are we creating an atmosphere which is gatekeeping and possibly enables sort of bid rigging?
I think it's challenging because one of my big pushes, and we've managed to break that monopoly, which is great. But what I want to do, one of my big pushes, is to enable new tech into the sector. And we really try hard to encourage and support new tech coming into the sector, even if it potentially competes with us, because the sector really, really needs it. But and conferences and exhibitions and stuff are a great way to do that. But when you have a conference that, if you're a brand new provider, you're a one-man band or a two-person army or whatever that is, if you want to stand at that exhibition so you can, go and sort of see those new providers, and sorry, see those housing providers, and advertise your goods and talk to them about projects and things like that, the money that will cost you is often huge, huge for the big exhibitions. And there are big exhibitions throughout the year. And one of the challenges is that during COVID, they all shut down, quite understandably. You would expect that, absolutely. And then after COVID, there was like this void. There was a void because everything was reset. So the man and his dog decided, let's have a conference. So now we have too many conferences, and they can't. It's not a sustainable amount, And the sector's gone through lots of different. Oh, we'll have little regional conferences. Oh, we'll have big national conferences and things like that. The problem is, if you go to one of the big national conferences, and you want to exhibit as a spy, say, look, I've got a great innovative piece of tech that will save lives, reduce costs, and whatever your game is that you're in, you've got to fork out thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds to do that. So if you want an exhibition stand, so your standard exhibition stand would be what's called a 3x3, with 3 meters by 3 meters, be a shell scheme. So you've got those little metal, which you will have seen, those little metal rail things around it. So effectively what you get is a shell scheme, your name in a printed board at the top, and that's your conference stand. But if you want electric, it's a couple £100 for electric for the day. It's okay, so electric. Then you've got to have insurance. Then you've probably got a 20-page document to fill out. Then you've got to staff it, and you've got to put furniture on it, and you've got to, you're building up all of these costs to the point where, it's so prohibitively expensive that it's not doable, because your actual stand might cost you anywhere from £1,500 to £4,000. There's one particularly well-known conference. It's a 2-day, what we call a tabletop. So you rock up, you've got a tabletop and a plug, and that's fine. You put a couple of banners up, nice and easy. And there are some great examples of those in the sector. The CHC in Wales, which is sort of the sort of the national organisation for Wales, they do some of the fantastic little events. You may get a couple of hundred people at them. You have a tabletop. They charge you like £500, which seems really fair, absolutely fine. And you've got queues of people at your table having a chat and learning more about you. Perfect. But if you want to go to the one big national one, or there's one particular one that is known for this, they will charge you about £25,000 for the exhibit to exhibit there for the 2 days. Oh, but you get a speaker slot. You get a speaker slot. So it's a series of sales pitches in these speaker slots. How do you break a market like that? If you can't find £25,000 to do a 2 day exhibition, it's bonkers. That's not good. So what you get is exactly the same providers giving exactly the same stuff and pitch, their 20-year-old technology, and giving exactly the same, sort of chat about big data that never gets actioned. So I think a change needs to happen whereby innovative tech needs to come to the sector and needs a forum to do that in an affordable way, which works really, really well. And I think there needs to be more practicality about it because on the exhibition side can be fixed. I think the conference side for me needs to be focused less on trying to sell people stuff because that's what the exhibition's for. If you're interested in a new housing management system or I don't know, damp and mold sensors or whatever it is, or paint. There seem to be 20 paint providers and 20 shower providers at the last conference that I attended. Whatever you're selling, if somebody's interested in buying that, they're going to be looking around the exhibition and looking for it. They don't want to come to a talk about it. The talks need to be more focused on delivering rather than high level concepts that you're just going to go, yeah, it sounds really good and go back to your spreadsheet. So I think there need to be less conferences. I think they need to be more affordable, but conferences are commercial things, so they have to make money and these venues are expensive. So it's difficult. I don't know how you solve that problem. I don't know how you square that circle, but I recently put a post out about a conference that had gone on. And I said, look, think about this. If you're a 3,000 unit housing association and you're going to send somebody to that 2 day conference, right? That's probably going to cost you, for the sake of easy numbers, £2,000 or £3,000 by the time you pay for the conference ticket and the overnight and the travel and the loss of wages and all the rest of all the things that it costs you. Flip that around and say, actually, if you went to every tenant and said, we're going to send little Jimmy, who's your housing officer, out to a conference. These are the things that he thinks he's going to learn. Do you think that's worth it? And if so, would you put a quid in the bucket? How many people would put a quid in the bucket to have Jimmy not be looking after them for 2 days for their repairs and that? Do you know what I mean? It's any money I charge a housing, every pound I charge one of my customers is a pound from their customers that's not then going back into social housing. I've got to deliver value for that. And my side of the sector's lost that. The supply side of the sector lost that vision that that's what we're doing. And we have one of the principles we push is what we call fair exchange of value, which is a really common phrase. But if I sell something to a housing association, it has to be a fair deal. And I've reduced increments that are contractually available. We everything we provide has an inflation element in it, and inflation went crazy at one point, went up to 15-16%. We could have put a 15% increase on one of our customers. And I wrote to the IT director, I said, look, this wouldn't be the right thing to do. I'm just going to increase you by 5% because your rents are going up by about 5%. So and if our sales deals go through on this on their list price and it isn't right, we'll see if we can do something because it's about fair exchange of value. I knocked about 30 grand a year off one of my supply deals recently when they signed up. And they were literally signing the contract on it. I said, guys, I just want to amend the prices. And they looked horrified because they thought I was going to sting them for an extra bit of money. I said, I'm just going to bring it down. I'm going to cap it. Because if you look at that 5 year cost, that's an extra 30 grand a year for 5 years. I said, that really doesn't represent what I'm giving you. So I need to give you what's right. And they looked super suspicious, but they signed the contract and they're really enjoying their project, which is great. I think that value element is lost because I'm the only independent left now. Everybody else is owned by shareholders and big corporate overlords and American overlords and German overlords and all these sort of external investors. So every pound that I bring in is a pound for me and the other two directors that own the business. We work in the business. We're the only independent one left. Everybody gets bought up. And that's the problem. Once you're bought up, you've lost that vision, you've lost that care, and you've lost that love of a sector that I've worked in for 25, 30 years, that has a social purpose as well as a commercial purpose.
Very interesting. I agree with you wholeheartedly there, obviously. And I think, in a cost of living crisis where we're all looking at every pound and every pound that's being spent, and you see people going off to conferences and you see things just going up because, well, that's the way we charge it. It's 15% a year. We're allowed to do that. It's heartbreaking. Do you think you talk there about being sort of more agile because there's less of you and you can sort of adapt and change and be more considerate there? I've found that CEOs of housing associations have now become, they used to be financial officers and now they're sort of CEOs and they do seem to have the best interest of their investors at heart. Is that wrong of me to think that?
Think I think it differs. I think there are organizations that do look at it in different ways. And I think, in my time, I've seen housing associations sponsor football clubs and build skate parks and have boxes at their favorite, have corporate boxes at their favorite, football club and stuff. And they're extreme examples, but they're real life examples that I've seen happen. And that's not right. That's not, that's if you asked your tenants to vote on should we have a box at this club for the chief exec to entertain suppliers and friends, I'm not sure you'd get many yes votes on that. I think I think that bit of it's been lost. I think that's part of the problem in some organizations, not all. I mean, let me give the other side of the coin. I could name you organizations that are incredibly community focused, who are absolutely all about their tenants and really get that balance right. The sector is really, really spread out. And one of the problems that you've got with the housing association side of it, it's a bit like the bigger my competitors get, the harder it is to give a level of service. And probably, if we're honest, the bigger I got. If I had 5,000 customers, I'd give a lot different service to having 50 customers. So that's just a natural thing. And we've got to get over that. We've got to get to the point where a big landlord with thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of customers, and that there are some great examples. There's an organization that I've been working with has just got what's called a 111 rating, which is the best rating you can have. You're probably aware of that. And they really, really work hard. There are some great organizations of scale out there, but the organizations that aren't have that, they've got that vision. I think they're just struggling to execute it in some examples. And I don't think it's lack of vision or laziness necessarily. I think it's more to do with the sort of the situation they're in, the tools that they've got in their toolbox, and what they're able to do to deliver on that vision. Because I think their visions are optimistic, and I think their visions are genuine. But what tools have they got to do that? Are their staff, capable and competent to do that? Are their systems delivering and enabling their staff to do that? They certainly have the financial resources. There are very few housing associations that struggle financially, and it's interesting when you see cuts in the sector, and housing associations say, well, this is terrible, this is terrible. We need this money to build. Absolutely, that's absolutely the case. I want all housing associations to build. I think it's a fantastic sector and something to do really, really well. But I also don't want housing associations spending money on football boxes and sponsoring this and doing that when that's not their core mission. That's not what they do. They're there to provide housing. They're not there to be an estate agent. They're not there to be a commercial arm. They're not there to do. They're there to deliver social housing, and anything else they do needs to be in support of that goal, not to dilute their social purpose. They need to stick to their core social purpose. In my opinion, need to stick to that core social purpose. Don't build skate parks. Don't send around, library vans and things. It's not, those are bad things. Kids need entertainment and people need books and all these great things. But stick to what you're good at. Deliver great housing, great value, deliver it well, keep your customers happy. And a lot of organizations are moving to have a phrase. I've seen it in a couple of customers, keeping customers at the heart of everything we do. I love that phrase, but is that meaningful, or is it just a tagline for marketing? I think it's important to make sure that that's something that you really genuinely do. And some of my customers, for example, so we have a customer portal as part of our product. And some of our customers said, well, actually, Simon, we'd like this on the customer portal. And we've been out to our tenants, and this is the feedback from our tenant. I love that. Tenants know what they want on a portal. Customers know what on a portal. Housing associations have a really good idea. And I, as a provider, have another step less of an idea. The people who know what they want on that portal are people like yourselves, when you want to be able to go on and see your repairs and get some great communications and do all these things. So keeping customers at the heart of what people do can be a tagline, or can be something that people actually live. And organizations that live that end up sort of delivering more. They care more about their customers. I think the era of housing associations, and 20 years ago, I saw chief executives that were flying out to Hong Kong to look at social housing in Hong Kong, and they took their family, and flying out to Texas and things. I'm like, that's 20 years ago. That's not a thing now. The sector changes. I heard a story about a chief exec about 20 years ago that had a limo for him in the chair to go to a works do. I'm like, this is social housing money. So now that's not a thing. That those sorts of things don't and shouldn't happen. And I think that'll continue. And conferences, to go back to the point, conferences will be the same sort of thing, Ben. Whereas if you're going to a conference and it's going to cost, in my earlier example, say £3,000 for Jimmy to go, but we're going to send 4 people, so that's £12,000. Tell me what value that's bringing back. Show me £12,000 worth of value that's going to deliver to our organization, to our professional development. Is it going to make them better housing officers? Is it going to bring better suppliers in? Is it going to, deliver better for our customers and things like that? If that's the case, great, let's do that. If not, that's what we need that conference to do. It's not an opportunity to just pick up a bunch of pens and highlighters and books and sweeties in a crappy bag and then go back and say, hey, look, kids, I've got some highlighters for you for school. Because that tends to be what happens at the exhibitions. It needs to be, if you're sending 4 people, if that's costing you 12 grand, that needs to bring 12 grand's worth of value back to that housing organization, because that's 12 grand that you're not putting into replacing 3 or 4 boilers or, changing 500 smoke alarms or whatever. Didn't do the numbers there, but but
Yeah.
that's the sort of thing that it needs to be. That's the sort of, how many smoke alarms is that conference worth? And how does it pay for those smoke alarms? Because actually, I'd rather you spent the money on the smoke alarms, people. You know,
Yeah. The ROI, the return on interest,
100%.
return on investment. And whenever I speak to young people and they're off to university, I say, "Oh, what are you going to do?" "Oh, it's event management," and that was something that we never heard of 20 years ago. That wasn't a university thing. Look, you've obviously jumped through a lot of procurement hoops in your time, and we talk about the skill shortage and a lack of sort of local response. Have we made procurement too difficult so that a local roofer, for example, can't become a procurement or approved a provider to locally go out and fix a roof in an emergency issue?
I think it's a really interesting problem. And it was what you remember I said earlier, that when we first launched the product, some very well-connected people that are very knowledgeable and said to me, no one will buy it. Sam, you're wasting your money. No one will buy it. Because the view is, if you go to a housing association, and the bigger the housing association, the more this is true, the first question they ask is, who else do you supply? How do you break into a market where you supply nobody else? It's a closed market. So it's true of my sector, but absolutely, if you are trying to enter a market, you need to know those prerequisites. And I saw a tender come out the other day for a council, and they said, how many other councils do you provide? Well, I said, I've got landlords 20 times your size on my books, but actually it's not a council. So you're not interested. So, that's not a thing that they want that. And it comes down to risk aversion. Organizations are risk averse, and largely a lot of them have a blame culture in there. And there are some great organizations and chief executives trying to break that blame culture in a lot of organizations as they move forward. Because actually, when there's a blame culture, everybody climbs up, everybody's risk averse, nobody innovates, everybody just does everything the same way it's been done because nobody ever got sacked for doing that thing. Well, okay, I get that, but actually, can we relax a bit? Can we accept that potentially we'll take some risks? Potentially, some of those risks won't pay off. But if more of it's a bit like investing, if more of those risks pay off than don't pay off, as long as nobody is put at risk and all of the never, the never happen events are covered, then that's all right. If there's some great tech out there, so there can be, let's look at your emergency lighting, Ben, from recent online content. There are emergency lights out there that will self-test, that will self-report their faults, and that will save fortunes for organizations. Okay, absolutely. We've got some of them integrating into our system. It's very, very cool tech. So that would have reported that fault to the landlord probably before you knew about it, because often lights will go in and out of fault, a bit like boilers, go in and out of fault before they fail completely. But if the provider of those lights has never supplied any housing organization before, how do they go to a housing association? Try these in 20 of your flats and see how they go. Let's do a trial together. Try these in 5 common areas, see how they go. Oh, who else do you supply? Oh, nobody. It's new tech. Oh, no, 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 no. I'm not spending. That's a problem. And there are lots of different ways trying to sort of, lots of different organizations and companies trying to get past that. So there's an organization that will try that sort of reverses the procurement process and sort of allows housing associations to put out a work sort of a piece of work that's required and have people bid on it and sort of reverse that. There are a lot of questionable issues around that, and there's a middleman cost around that. So I'm not sure. It's different though. It's trying something different. So, I think as a sector, we're going to struggle. And one of the big struggles at the moment for a lot of people over the last few years has been trades. Even, any homeowner. Oh, I want that wall plastered. You ring a tradesman. I'm too busy. Ring someone else. I'm too busy. Ring somebody else. I need a roofer at the minute. I've got a flat roof needs doing at my house. I can't get a roofer for love nor money. They're booked up for 6 months in advance. So that's a challenge. There's lots of challenges in the sector. And it goes in concentric circles. Housing associations say, right, I'm tired of all these externals, ripping us off and never being available. We're going to create a DLO. So we'll create a DLO, direct labor organization, which is internal trades force. So everybody works for them. We've got plumbers and electricians and joiners and all the rest of it. And they'll use their DLO. And then that DLO will sort of, over a period of years, potentially in some organizations get sort of a bit bloated and a bit expensive and a bit, because they're focused on service and not efficiency and all those things. And then we'll say, well, this DLO is too expensive. It's not competitive enough. And we need to go out. So they'll disband the DLO and they'll outsource it to somebody, and then it'll break up. And then 5 years later, it'll go back to, oh, it's a big circle. And you see it a lot. If you're in the sector long enough, you see it a lot. And if you're in social housing, you will have seen, your landlord go from tradespeople externally to an internal trades force, and then you'll get an external contractor coming back. And it's a bit of a lottery. There's no good answer is the problem as well. It's regional. It's dependent on your management. It's dependent. There's so many factors that make it good or good or bad. So the the sector is the sector is constantly evolving, and I think my job is to make sure that as a core part platform of that business, that it's flexible enough and changes on a regular basis to do that. I can't deliver that change. And for years, tenders that have come out have said, "Oh, so again, I saw one yesterday for I think it was Durham Council. Maybe they've got a tender out at the moment." I said, "How will your business enable and how will your business put force change into the business?" I'm paraphrasing here, but effectively, it was putting the onus on us to deliver process change and digital transformation into their business. Listen, when you go and buy a hammer, you don't ask the manufacturer of the hammer how it's going to hammer the nail into the wall. I'm giving you a tool. I'm showing you how to use that tool, but the delivery of change in your business is you as a business, not us as an IT provider. So I think that the balance isn't always right in that expectation, and that varies from organization to organization. I'm probably looking at the worst case scenarios. I've got some great customers who've got some great transformation teams, and they're doing some wonderful things at every different stage. Some of them are going through coming out of administration and improving their brand. Some of them are at the top of their tree and they're 111 rated. All of those things are fine as long as you're on that path to doing things better and doing things digitally will help you. But yeah, it's a difficult sector to break into, in not just the software side. A risk averse, sort of, well, who else has got it sector. It's very hard to break into a sector like that. And ultimately, it stifles innovation, it stifles change, it stifles quality delivery, because it eliminates a lot of risk. And I get that. I get the wish to eliminate risk, but we're too risk averse. We need to relax a little bit, take a few more risks, controlled risks, managed risks, and then we're opening ourselves as a sector to innovation. We're opening ourselves to new tech and things that are going to make things, quicker and easier and faster and more efficient. So, when your boiler gets serviced, that gas certificate goes into the landlord. Somebody might key that into a system. We've just brought in an AI, brand new tech. We've got an AI that reads that, posts it, lets it get checked by a human, then goes in. So we've saved probably 70% of that workload. That person is now 70% freer to do something else, to move that spreadsheet, to do those things. So the tools are evolving, and we have to make sure that those tools are freely available to everybody, rather than hidden behind walls. And that's why in our little part of that world, we're saying to smaller providers, look, if you've got a new innovation, if you've got a cool system, come and talk to us. How can we help you into the sector? How can we let you sort of, how can we refer you on to our customers to look at? I don't want money for that. I just want that innovation in the sector, open integration, great new tech, because that's the bit we can help with. So yeah, difficult sector to break into for sure.
Simon, I will have a QR code up in the corner of the screen so people can go directly to your website. If people want to have a conversation with you and sit down and get some of your valuable insights and talk more about your offering, I can provide them your email address.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely no problem at all.
That'll be along the website here on the podcast, wherever. And for those of you who are listening, and hello to everyone that's listening. I'm always amazed at how many of you are walking your dog, driving your car, or sitting in the bath. Hello to everyone who's listening there. That will all be in the comments field. You can find that, and we'll put some information up on our website. Simon, it's been great talking to you. Thank you very much indeed. Firstly, for reaching out and coming on and giving the other side of that coin, which shows your knowledge there and some of the solutions that are in play. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Ben.